ado, I'll turn it over to Jane.
Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you for being with us.
So I'm going to give you today a couple of different ways, a couple of different lines of thinking that I have about this work. Then they're quite different from each other, so just bear with me for a minute. So Homo sapiens, this would apply to all of us. Nowadays, people often identify with subgroups of which they're a part, but this is a group where we're all a part of this group, right? And this species evolves, it's thought, about 300,000 years ago. And agriculture is invented about 10,000 years ago. So that leaves 290,000 years of hunting and gathering. And hunting, which also includes fishing, is about going after live animals which are mobile and can flee. And gathering is about plants, and plants are stationary. Now, oddly enough, when I was a child, my parents were divorced before I was born, which was kind of unusual in the 50s. And I lived with my grandparents, and I was very close to my grandmother, and she has a lot to do. She's living in this work, but she didn't get up till 3. So I was kind of raised by my grandfather, who was retired and was an avid hunter and fisherman. So unlikely as it seems for a New York artist, I have been hunting hundreds of times and fishing hundreds of times. And my theory about hunting is you get something about half the time. Now, you could argue that 290,000 years ago, there was a lot more game. But then I would submit that the weapons were way poorer, right? So the point is that in between successful hunts, we all, Homo sapiens, have in our background lots of gathering. And gathering is about plants. And people can eat the tubers, the roots, the stems, the stalks, the leaves, the nuts, the berries, the fruit, and the flowers of plants. So there's a lot to go after. The trouble is that because plants are stationary, they lack the fleeing defense. So what they have is poison. There are lots of plants that are poison. Some will kill you quickly, and some will merely make you sick. So my theory is it became incumbent upon Homo sapiens, and the ones who learned it are the ones that we descend from, and the ones who didn't learn it are the ones who died. It became incumbent upon them to look at plants very carefully. In fact, I would submit that careful looking was honed on plants. And so you had to say to yourself, are these purple berries in front of me right now the same purple berries that we ate a week ago and were so delicious and fabulous? Or are they the purple berries that killed my brother last year? Okay, so like, what's the color of the berry? What's the shape of the berry? What's the reflectivity or dustiness of the berry? What do the stems of the berry look like? Are the branches oppositional or staggered? I mean, they might not have had the words for these things, but certainly the people that got rewarded with life and longevity and continuity and having children and blah, 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 were the ones who could look at plants critically. In fact, I would even submit to you that like critical thinking comes from plant looking. And the essence of critical thinking is compare and contrast. How much is this thing like that thing, and how much is it different from it? And if you think about what law is like precedent. It's a series of precedents. So is this case like this case? Or is this case importantly different from this case? Science experiments. I mean, all aspects of what's innovative, what's not innovative, what's repetitive, what's scientific, et cetera. Literary traditions, the study of art history, it all has to do with likeness and difference. So I guess I think that looking at plants and looking at plants closely is something that is uniquely important. It's a unique subject that is embedded in our DNA and makes us who we are. And an important thing about art is if when you look at it, you feel enlivened, more human, more alive, more your best self, like your smarter self, your more sentient self, your more perceptive self. And I think that it's the nexus in which those perceptions were built is plant looking. That's my thesis. So that would be something that makes doing this important, I think. And also, I think looking at them satisfying. Now I'm going to drop that, and I'm going to move on to collage. These are all collages. Everything on here comes from a separate place in the world, in time, culturally, materially, and is cut out and comes together here. I mean, what's the opposite of this? The opposite of this is an art of unicity, like Brancusi's Bird in Space. That's the opposite. The form is wrenched out of something that's completely homogeneous. This is like a form that's built out of something that has inherent heterogeneity about it. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. So the word collage means it's in French, it means to glue. It really comes from a Greek word, kolla, K-O-L-L-A, which means glue itself. And so the essence of it is that you have all these different things. Now, in my case, what do I mean by different? I don't just mean different kinds of plants and animals. I mean different kinds of reflectivity because they're on different kinds of paper. Different scale relationships, both natural or unnatural, whatever that exactly means. Different media, like this is hand-painted, as is this and this and this and this. This is a digital copy of old 50s wallpaper. Let's see if there's some analog printmaking in a lot of them, like this daisy over here is a linoleum block that I carved. I print it out in a regular printing press on some paper that I've collaged underneath here. If you looked at it really closely, you could even see the paper has embedded maple leaves in it. You'd have to look at it for a long time to see that. So anyhow, these disparities, you might call them, of size, scale, materiality, reflectivity, all these different things, to me, they impart a kind of tension to the work. That were they all the same? Like the Boston Museum right now has a lovely show up, I mean, it looks lovely online, of Dutch women painters. They're beautiful paintings, but every tulip in the painting is made of the same materiality and with the same touch and the same kinds of brush strokes as every other tulip in the painting. For me, what I'm interested in is kind of wrenching a harmony, a kind of ensemble out of tension and difference and friction. And so in the end, I feel like you get this oscillation in your mind between unity and disunity. And I feel like that's more interesting than a straight up unity. I mean, this is just my opinion, but it's more like life itself, which is kind of collagey if you think about walking down the street. And it has in it also embedded senses of time, even periodicity, like this is from a 50s coloring book. I think it's kind of freighted with a kind of 50s feeling. So it's Canterbury Bells, but it's also kind of like pop 50s Canterbury Bells, as opposed to like English engraving 1720 Canterbury Bells. So that clash and the oscillation between the clash and the harmony, that's an important thing to me. And it's like, that's what collage does best. Now, there's another thing about collage I like a lot, and it's hard for me to explain, but let me see if I can give it a whirl. Right here is a little detail in which you have this bird. I think this is an Australian lorikeet, and he's a photograph. And he has a kind of contemporary, like maybe someone just took that picture last year kind of look about him. And then over here, you have this butterfly. And that butterfly is actually from a German chromolithograph in the 1870s. And then you've got this coral branch, which, as I pointed out over here, is something I've invented and painted by hand. And what I do when I think of these corals, this and this, these corals and this, as like the bones of the composition. And it's too like kind of soft without the bones in my mind. So I get the flowers kind of going. When I get something I pretty much like, I flop an acetate. I'm working on a flat table. I flop an acetate down on it. And then I draw on the acetate with a magic marker how I want the shapes of the bones to be. And then I trace that and paint them. So I actually made these, but I can make them exactly for this composition. Whereas this thing is found, this thing is made. So that's another kind of distinction. Okay, so back over here. So when you see these three things together, I think you can have two ways of thinking about it at the same time. One way is your mind makes a little plot that goes something like, this bird is looking at this butterfly. What are his intentions? This bird is perched on this branch. He's looking at this butterfly who's on that branch. Okay, at the same time, if you get up close, you know by looking at the materialities that none of this came together. That the plot that I've just described is in your head. It's not here. I just put them together like he's never been with him in his life. And in a way, you kind of know all that when you look at it. So it's like, it's got this, that's the thing I like about collage. It's more actual, and it's more like the viewer almost finishes it. Like the viewer's thoughts are a more important part of the process of looking. Okay, now let me drop that and go on to something else. Sometimes people ask me, now I'm going to frequently ask questions. Sometimes people ask me, how do you get started? Is that it? Okay. So I get started in different ways. This was some paper I bought online from a fabric store in London that had this little category on their website, paper. And then when I got it, I saw that it had this gray in the blue, so I got this gray paper, which is the same paper over there. Now, when I buy tons of paper. I'm buying paper all the time. It's like an obsession. I don't even know till I get it if I'm going to like it or not. But I remembered that this bronze urn, I wanted to make a big piece with this because the pattern of the marble is big. I remembered that this bronze urn, it looks almost like it's like powdered with gray powder. Like it's a reddish bronze, but it's got this gray kind of dusting here and there. So that was the beginning of the idea here, was like this coloristic marriage between that gray and these patterns. Whereas over here, this is more like a materials, almost like a pun. I found this Japanese wood grain paper in a drawer. I love this paper. I thought I didn't have any more of it, but really it was just buried and misplaced in my drawer, and I found some. So I cut the sheets up into like boards. There was a pinker sheet and a grayer sheet, and then I made this ground. It seems like a composition that's wood-like, if you know, like siding, okay? And then I remembered that I had this Chinese carved wooden bucket. And so that was the genesis of the idea, was like wood on wood. And then I thought, oh, woodpeckers, you know? And so without even really thinking about it, I put the wood, I never put an animal on the vase before, but it just seemed like so interesting. And then this flower, Aristolochia, is very sexual. At least in my mind it is. So I was like, he's kind of ogling the Aristolochia. And then up here, I used birch bark. It's actually, real birch bark is not archival. So this is actually some birch bark that I bought on eBay, and then I scanned, and then I made the branches of. So this idea was really not coloristic, but like the concept of the material of wood. Then over here, this is a little similar to that in the sense that I got this paper and I thought it was fabulous, and I liked how it was see-through. So I don't know if you see these lines here, these bigger lines. So I drew on the white paper with graphite, and then I glued this dark fibrous paper on there. And I had found this. This is, you know what classic Wedgwood looks like? It's powder blue with white. So this is Wedgwood, but it's all black. It's called Jasperware. And I just thought that was a good kind of marriage. And then it just got into that, what's black and white and red all over? Or so, you know, just got into that cadmium red light, this very orangey kind of red, and different kind of playing around with different things there. Let's see if I can come, okay, so over there, now this was also inspired. I bought that mauve paper. I didn't know if I'd like it or not, but as I say, I'm buying paper like fiendishly all the time. You don't really know if you like it till you have it, is my theory. And then I discovered these Martaban jars. So if you can sort of picture like Burma going into Thailand, and there's this gulf in here. It's called the Gulf of Pegu, P-E-G-U, and there's a port there, and that port was called Martaban by Arab traders. And these Martaban jars I read about, they're like the Sealand shipping containers of their day. Like everything was shipped in these jars. So I got a bunch of these jars and I printed them out. I printed out that one and I thought, wow, that looks like root beer. Like it just was a brown I really liked. So that began with the combination of the mauve and the brown. And the minute I put those two things together, I thought yellow-green. Now, I also was really looking for an excuse to use Picasso moths. There are 3 Picasso moths in the lower, yeah, thank you, in the lower right corner. They're named for him because they have a beautifully abstract kind of pattern. So they made their way in there, and that's really all I need to say about that one. So another question I get is, how do you know when you're finished? Is that an interesting question? So there's a collector. I think he used to live here. I have 5 pieces in SF MoMA, 3 big paintings and 2 works on paper, and they were all the gift of this one collector. And he came to my studio years ago, and he was new to collecting, but he was collecting like crazy, and he was properly inquisitive instead of like pretending he knows everything. And he said to me, Jane, how do you know when you're finished? Because everything I make is like a more is more. You know, everything has a lot in it. So I think that's where the question comes from. So the answer that popped out of my mouth, and it kind of surprised me because I never even had this thought before, was, well, Kent, you're going camping, and you build a circle of rocks, and then you make a fire inside it. And in the first hour, the fire is hot and the rocks are cool. And in the 3rd hour, the fire is hot and the rocks are hot. And in the 10th hour, the fire is cool and the rocks are still warm. So somehow, I guess I'm the fire and this is the rocks. Somehow or another, the energy gets transferred out of me into the object. And then sometimes I'd even like to work on it more because I'm kind of a workaholic and it's only 8 o'clock at night and I was planning on working till 10. But it's like the piece is just saying to me, no, go away, girl. We're through with you, you know? We're full, we're hot, you know, it's done. So that has served me as an answer to that question. Somebody else asked me earlier tonight how I got into this. Okay. So I came of age at a certain point in the art world. And my bias was New York. Although I had some teachers that went to Davis, I had some un-New Yorky strains in my artistic upbringing. But anyhow, minimalism was the altar that pretty much everybody worshipped at when I came of age as an artist. If you read Donald Judd's criticism, this is kind of the Bible of minimalism. And one of the statements he makes is, I'm for an art that is not relational. Okay? And like Frank Stella said, what you see is what you see. So the idea was like, no metaphor, nothing means anything other than what you think it, what you see it means. And the forms should traffic in unicity. And in like Gestalt psychology was the thing underneath minimalism, like a single perceptual experience. Okay, so I had an enormous prescription in my mind against anything that was beautiful. Beauty was like, oh my God, if you made something that was beautiful, that meant you had a low IQ, okay? Or you couldn't, you were incapable of rigorous thinking. And flowers were like at the low end of the totem pole of beauty, okay? Now, I lived with my grandparents, as I said. My grandmother made me memorize the Latin names of 100 flowers when I was 6. My parents lived on 8 acres in Connecticut. They knew the Latin names of every flower. My father didn't know it when he married my mother, but he knew it 5 years later, So like horticulture is something that's in my background, but I never felt comfortable bringing it into art. Now, by sheer accident, I've had a lot of shows in Detroit, and I have a lot of work in Detroit. When I had a museum show in Detroit, the dealer Googled the work to see what they could borrow, and I had 100 pieces in Detroit. The curator there of prints bought every print I made, and she was super supportive and super nice to me. And she had a fundraiser where she wanted to commission an artist to make a set of prints, and she would sell them and use the money. So I thought, I'm going to make something for Nancy Soika that's really beautiful, and everybody really likes it, so I can make her a lot of money. I don't think I would have let myself have this thought if it was for me, but because it was a charity for her and she'd been so good to me, I kind of felt I owed her. I did it for her. So I made the first ones, and I had this printer working with me, and they were all different from each other, but they were mostly printmaking. And I said, it's going to be like flower arranging. We're going to make a surfeit of vases over here, and every vase is going to be a little bit different. And we're going to make a surfeit of flowers over here, and we're going to lay them all out, and then I'm going to arrange the flowers in the vases, and each one will be different. So I had a contract, and I had to have it in Detroit by a certain day, and it was crazy. I had to buy a skill saw and plywood at Home Depot and build the crate myself. And it only got there on the last possible day. But Nancy sent me an email, and she said, Jane, I have way more takers than 23. I'm going to have a raffle. So, I mean, it really kind of worked out well. And then I have a nature where, like, the minute I do it, I think of how it could be better. So then I made another round, and I made another round, and I made another round. And then I took it out of the realm of printing altogether because I didn't want to work with other people. I didn't want to hear about their budgets and their problems. And they don't like this paper because it's too expensive. And, I just didn't want to do that. So I kind of got into it in an ass-backwards kind of way because it was this charity. And then it probably also helped me that it was so successful. It was a little bit of a shot in the arm. But it was really basically like a floodgate that opened because I had so many thoughts about plants and animals and so much interest in learning more about them. Like I did a piece with a tarsier in it, which is a little primate in Madagascar. And then, you can just go down these rabbit holes like primates of Madagascar, small primates of Madagascar, and it just goes on and on. I mean, the other thing that was important to me was I was a resident at Dartmouth in 2006. So I was just getting started with this body of work. And I had unlimited library privileges and unlimited library help. In fact, at one point, the head librarian called me and she said, I know you're the resident artist and you have all the library privileges you want, but I do want you to know you have 129 books out now. Would you like me to send someone over to carry some of them back? So that was another thing, like the Dartmouth Medical Library was filled with people that needed to learn the latest information. You don't actually want a doctor who's interested in vintage medicine, you know? But it was stacked with all these books from the great age of when taxonomy, you know, the mosses of Puerto Rico, the lichens of 13 volumes on the lichens of Turkey, you know? So it was just like a complete field day for me and the beginnings of all this research. And that's a big part of it. People often ask me, how long does it take you to do one of these? I mean, I'm kind of gluing for like 2 weeks. But behind that is all this procurement that's going on all the time, which I have no idea how to rate that time-wise, not to mention the printing, not to mention the cutting, because one of the further essences of collage is that it's a form of play. It has a quality of surprise to it, even to the artist. And that surprise doesn't happen if you don't have a great surfeit of stuff. And it also doesn't happen if you have to stop and go find a succulent and print it out and cut it. You're like, well, maybe I could use a water lily, you know? So you really need to have like a ton of stuff. So that's a big part of the project, is all this research. Which leads me to my last and maybe final point, which is, it sounds like kind of a cliched thing to say, but nature is unfucking believable, you know? I mean, if I had started this project and someone had said to me, how many species of hummingbirds do you think there are? I would have known it was a trick question. So instead of saying 20, I would have said 45. But there's 166. You know, I mean, it's kind of amazing when you go down. Like one of the places I get bird images, because I don't want to steal images from bird photographers, because that's how they make their living, photographing birds, you know? And they're very proprietary as well. But I will Google, like I'm interested in going on these birding trips, birding in Suriname, birding in Madagascar, birding in Malaysia, and then there's like all these birds. And then you go kingfishers of Malaysia. And it's just like, so it's like, wow, I hope this doesn't all disappear. You know, this is the big threat of our lifetime, is like the erosion of biodiversity. And biodiversity, I have to say, it's bigger and more resplendent and more, it's not infinite, but I mean, it's huge. You know, it's just unbelievable how differentiated and specific. You know, there's hummingbirds that are, the bee hummingbird, I don't know if I have one somewhere here. It's a very little hummingbird, as the name implies. It's only in Cuba. You know, if the Cubans don't take care of that hummingbird, forget about it, you know? So anyhow, I'm happy to take questions. Yes?
I have a million. But I'll start with one. Obviously, it sounds like you've done some traveling.
Yeah, not as much.
How are you inspired when you travel? Yeah, you must, like going to a botanical garden or going to Kew Gardens or something like that.
Okay, so the last time I was in San Francisco, my friend Clinton said to me, you should go to the Salesforce Garden. Now, the Salesforce Garden has a beautiful monkey puzzle tree. I mean, it is a stunning example of that tree, which I think is Australian, but you have to check me on that. So this image right here is from the Salesforce monkey puzzle tree. And then I took more pictures of that monkey puzzle tree yesterday. I really went to the park to take pictures of that one tree, because I wanted some that were swooping down and that were like bifurcated, or actually I got one that's trifurcated. So I go to botanical things everywhere I go. The other thing is when you get flowers like from the internet, people are kind of trying to take these like show pony flowers, like this is my dahlia. So if you're interested in flowers from the back, flowers that are a little falling apart, flowers that are wet or a little ratty, like, I took all these pictures in the St. James Park in London, and this woman said to me, "You're only interested in the bad flowers." But so that's what I was trying to accumulate, So I do it, and I take pictures, like my sister's a master gardener. I take pictures at her place. But I would say more of the photography is not mine than is mine. Or maybe it's half and half, but I think it's not half and half. I think it's more like 70-30, 80-20. Yeah?
Do you use the same printmaking technique for all of the things, or you kind of like vary?
So I have metal relief plates, linocuts, and lithographs, and occasionally rubber stamps. And that's all I've used. So what am I not using? Silkscreen, for example, would be a good example. I don't really like silkscreen. It's too flat or something. I don't know why but yeah, that's an important part of it to me. I've made a few that don't have any analog prints in them, but I like that disparity, between the highly resolved photographic image. By resolved, I mean many pixels per square inch, and the analog printmaking, which is much simpler. Yeah?
Do you work on more than one at a time?
No. No, it's all I can do to make one. I mean, like, I'm always buying paper. I'm always making images. Like at night I cut and stuff like that. And I might have several ideas at once, and I have notes about those ideas. But once I get into like composing it and gluing it, it's all I can do to do one. And when I get deeply towards the end, it's like a Rubik's Cube of like, this stem has to go behind here, and then where's it going to go over here, and it's going to come out there. And everyone always says to me, "Oh, your work looks like it's so pleasurable." It's really not. I mean, it's pleasurable some of the time. And you have this enormous high when you finish if you've made a piece that you like. And I stand up on the ladder and go, "Oh, you're a fucking genius," But before that, I'm very worried, downbeat, anxious. It's no good. I have 2 weeks into this thing. It's a big mess. I have to throw it out. There's a whole kind of emotional narrative or cycle with each one. And it's all built on this one thing. Yeah?
Your work is masterful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Also, the stories are wonderful. Do you put together a libretto of your story for each of your works?
Well, we are doing a book. Thanks to John. It was his idea. So, and I've written a piece for the book. It's quite like the beginning of my talk, about the importance of plant looking, which is a theory I just came up with this year. I haven't always had it. The body of work precedes the theory, actually. I don't know, thank you. If you went to 2 different talks, you'd hear, this is what my husband says, I never know what you're going to say. But yeah, I think it is good.
It's fun.
Yeah. It has to be fun for me, too. You know what I mean? Like, if I hear myself saying things I've already said, it's like canned and yikes. Yes?
How do you store and organize all of your materials?
Oh, yeah. So this is true for like everything I make. Everything I make is collage, whether it's photography. I own 20,000 vernacular photographs. That's other people's snapshots. That's a real organizational challenge. I have things on these trays. I mean, John can attest. It's like a big mess. It's not, I have things on these trays. Some of the things are coloristically organized. Some of the things are organized by type, like I've got all the cactus together and all the orchids together. And it's the seaweed and coral together. And then some of them are like organized by their orientation, like they're hanging down, or you look at them from, so I have these different, so then a given thing could fall into look down upon, yellow, or fruit, and it could be in any one of those things. And over the years, it's occurred to me that like, when your filing system is like B-, then when you're looking for something, you find something else that shouldn't be there, and it might be good. It might be that the idea that you have in your head is not the best idea. So I don't worry about the organization as much as I once did. What else? Yeah.
You mentioned sort of themes of like the woodpecker and things like that. Does like the language of flowers, like the Victorian languages?
I could have paid you to ask this question. I'm very interested in the language of flowers. I want to do a show kind of more oriented around that in the future. But in this book that we're going to publish, I sent the woman like my favorite titles, and even bold-faced my favorite components of the titles. And I said, you know how a book has the end papers, that's the inside of the outside? And I said, maybe you could make a pattern with just text of these titles, because I think about the titles a lot. I think about how they sound, how they mean, the cadence of them. And the language of flowers is fascinating, totally fascinating. And a lot of them are these odd metaphors that you think, really? Like I learned this little flower. I was buying vegetables in Nantucket this summer, and my mother said to me, "What's that?" And I said, "I don't know what that is. It looks like a little petunia, but it's not a petunia." So I have the plant app, so I put it on it, and it's baby jump up. Like, I don't see anything baby jump up about this flower, but I love the name. I almost used it in the show title. So that's like to be done in the future. Last question, maybe? Am I talking too long?
No. You said you painted before. Was this the same subject now?
No. Of all the paintings I've done, there's only one painting I can think of that has flowers alone in it. And I was so uptight about doing flowers that it had these abstract kind of bars in it, and I made the flowers like huge, and I made the painting like 20 feet tall, and like there's a few flowers, but there's no flowers or plants only. Because as I said, I was uptight about it then.
And you evolved.
I'd like to think of it as an evolution. Yeah.
Can I ask one more? I don't want to hog it from anybody else. Before the internet, how has the internet changed your approach?
Yeah.
And also, has AI taken any?
Yeah, so that's why I gave the Dartmouth example with the books. Like, all the work that I've made for many, many years came from a lexicon of found information. I taught for the first 10 years of my career, and I lived in New York, and I taught in Baltimore, and I commuted. And the neighborhood was kind of rough. So I didn't go out at dinner time. I spent all the evenings in the library. Like 3 nights a week, I spent the whole evening in the library. And I amassed these huge lists, the names of English castles, the types of swans, all this stuff. So the internet is perfect for me because I'm like a junkie of like, I don't mean it in but in other words, if I see a word that I don't know in the Times in the morning, I like get on it right away, So I love the internet, it's perfect for me. I'm a researcher by nature. I'm a digger, like I love to just dig into things and learn new things and stuff like that. I haven't used AI yet. I'm not opposed to it. I just don't really know what to do or how to do it.
I was just thinking for organization.
Yeah. I'm organized enough. I'm as organized as I want to be. Thank you very much.